Crack! The sound of glass shattering against the marble floor echoed through the office like a gunshot. Yasmin Hosseini stood frozen, the broom trembling in her hands as she stared at the fragments of the vase scattered at her feet. The silence that followed was deafening. "Damn it!" she muttered in Farsi, not realizing she had spoken aloud. Her green eyes, the color of the Persian emeralds that once adorned her childhood home in Tehran, filled with tears she refused to shed. Not here, not in this place where she was already invisible. The chill of the Boston winter seeped through the windows of the international consulting firm's headquarters, but the shaking in her hands wasn't just from the weather. It was fear, the same fear that had been her constant companion for the last 3 years, ever since the Foundation Refugees Welcome had rescued her from a refugee camp on the border between Turkey and Iran. What happened here? The deep, slightly raspy voice startled her. Yasmin looked up slowly, preparing to face the fury of some executive, but what she found left her breathless. A man of about 30 was watching her from the doorway. His blue eyes, as intense as the winter sky over the Charles River, seemed to see right through her. He wore a perfectly tailored dark grey suit that screamed money and power, but there was something in his expression that wasn't anger, but curiosity. I'm so sorry, sir. It was an accident. I'll pay for the vase, even if it takes me months. She stammered in English that, while fluent, still held the slight Persian accent that marked her as a foreigner. The man approached, and Yasmin could smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something strangely familiar. Something that reminded her of afternoons in her childhood at the Grand Bazaar in Tehran, when she still believed the world was a safe place. "Don't worry about the vase," he said, crouching to pick up one of the larger shards. It was ugly anyway. For the first time in a long time, Yasmin felt like someone was truly looking at her, not as the Iranian cleaning lady who scrubbed their offices every night, but as a person, a woman. "You're new here." It wasn't a question, but a statement. "I've been working here for 6 months, sir." Her voice was barely a whisper. 6 months? He seemed genuinely surprised. "I work in this building every day and I've never seen you." Because no one sees people like me, Yasmin thought, but she didn't say it. Instead, she bent down to continue picking up the fragments, but he stopped her with a gentle gesture of his hand. "Leave it. Someone else will get it." Kian Rashidi watched as the woman slowly stood up, as if every movement cost her a superhuman effort. There was something about her that was disturbingly familiar, though he was sure he had never seen her before. Maybe it was the way she held her chin high despite the humiliation, or perhaps the wounded pride that shone in her green eyes. Those eyes, he had seen them in the mirror for years, especially in the first few months after fleeing Iran at just 18, with the false documents his father had managed to get before everything fell apart. "What's your name?" he asked, surprising himself with his own interest. Yasmin Hosseini." She hesitated before giving her last name, as if revealing her full identity was a risk. The name hit him like a punch. Hosseini, a Persian surname as common as his own. Their eyes met for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, and Kian had the strange sensation of looking into a mirror that reflected not his appearance, but his soul. "Kian," he said simply, extending his hand. "Kian Rashidi." Yasmin's eyes widened imperceptibly. Rashidi, also Persian, also an exile, judging by the expensive suit and the confidence with which he moved through this building, filled with international power. When their hands touched, it was as if an electric current passed through them both. Yasmin pulled hers back quickly, as if she'd been burned. I have to finish cleaning," she murmured, grabbing her cleaning cart with trembling hands. "Yasmin!" he called out as she was already walking away. She stopped without turning around. The vase, it really was ugly. He heard a soft, almost imperceptible laugh before she disappeared down the hall. And in that instant, Kian remembered that his heart still knew how to beat. That night, Yasmin returned to her small one-room apartment in Dorchester, one of the few places in Boston where someone on her salary could afford to live. She sat on her single bed, the only furniture besides a folding table and a plastic chair, and finally allowed herself to process what had happened. Kian Rashidi. That name had awakened something in her that she had kept dormant for years. Not just attraction, though that was there too, undeniable and unsettling. It was recognition, the feeling of finding someone who maybe, just maybe, understood the weight of carrying a past you couldn't change and a future that seemed impossible to reach. She went to the small window overlooking the street and looked at the illuminated city. Boston was beautiful, cosmopolitan, full of opportunities. But for someone like her, it was also a gilded cage. Grateful refugees didn't dream too high. They worked, they survived, and if they were lucky, their children would have better opportunities. But that afternoon, for the first time in 3 years, she had felt someone see her, truly see her, and that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Kian, for his part, stayed in his office much later than usual. His international consulting firm had grown exponentially in the last 5 years, making him one of the youngest men on Forbes' list of American millionaires. But that night, none of that seemed to matter. He couldn't get the image of Yasmin picking up the vast shards out of his head, the dignity with which she had faced the situation, the way her voice had trembled slightly as she apologized. There was something in her that reminded him of himself in those early years of exile, when pride was the only thing keeping him on his feet. He picked up his phone and dialed the number of Mark Thompson, his personal assistant. "Mark, I need you to find out everything you can about a cleaning staff employee in this building, Yasmin Hosseini." "Sir, is there a problem?" No problem. Just curiosity." After hanging up, Kian stared out the window of his 23rd floor office. The city stretched out at his feet like an illuminated chessboard, and for the first time in years, he felt more like a pawn than a king. The next day, Mark handed him a discreet file. Yasmin Hosseini, 23 years old, single, arrived in the United States 3 years ago under the refugee program. She worked 6 days a week, by day at one cleaning service, by night cleaning offices in the financial district. She was studying English at the community college on Saturday mornings. The file was sparse, clinical, but between the lines, Kian could read a story of survival that was painfully familiar. That evening, he intentionally stayed late at the office. When he heard the sound of the cleaning cart in the hallway, he felt his pulse quicken in a way he hadn't experienced since he was a teenager. Yasmin appeared at his office door and stopped when she saw him there. "Mr. Rashidi, I didn't know you were here. I can come back later." "Don't go," he said, getting up from his desk. "Do you have a moment?" She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. In her world, powerful men who asked for a moment from vulnerable women rarely had good intentions. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday," he continued, noticing her discomfort. "I shouldn't have put you in that awkward situation with the vase." "You have nothing to apologize for, sir." "Kian," he corrected her gently. "And yes, I do. I also wanted to ask you something." Yasmin waited, all her survival instincts on high alert. "Do you speak Farsi?" The question caught her completely off guard. For a moment, the careful wall she had built around her identity wavered. "Why do you ask?" "Because yesterday, when the vase broke, you said something in Farsi. And because—" he hesitated, as if revealing a secret. "Because I speak it too." Yasmin's eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't hide. In 3 years in Boston, she had never met anyone who spoke her native language. The loneliness of living in silence, of holding back thoughts and feelings that could only be expressed in Farsi, had been one of the most painful aspects of her exile. "Yes," she whispered finally, "I speak it." "What part of Iran are you from?" "Tehran." "And you?" "Isfahan. But I left a long time ago." They looked at each other in silence, 2 exiles recognizing each other in a foreign land. The social distance between them. He, a millionaire, she, a refugee who cleaned. Offices suddenly seemed less important than the geographical and emotional distance they had both traveled to get there. "Why did you leave?" Kian asked. though he suspected the answer would be painful. Yasmin closed her eyes for a moment, as if deciding how much of her truth she could share. "Because I had no choice," she said finally. "And you?" "For the same reason." In those few words, a universe of loss, fear, hope, and survival was condensed. Both knew there was much more to tell, but they also knew that some stories could only be revealed little by little, like peeling an onion one layer at a time to keep from crying too much at once. "I have to get back to work," Yasmin said finally, breaking the spell of the moment. "Of course, I should be heading home too." But neither of them moved. They just stood there, separated by a few feet of elegant office space, united by thousands of miles of shared nostalgia. "Yasmin," Kian said, as she finally grabbed the handle of her cart. "Yes? If you ever need to talk to someone who understands, I'm here." She nodded without looking at him directly and left the office. But that night, for the first time in 3 years, Yasmin fell asleep feeling that she was not completely alone in the world. Have you ever felt like no one saw you until someone did? Like this story if it touched your heart. Comment with the city you're reading from and subscribe for the next part. The following days passed with a strange, electric tension that Yasmin had never felt before. Every evening when she arrived to clean the 23rd floor offices, her heart raced at the possibility of running into Kian. And every evening, he seemed to find a reason to stay and work late. They didn't talk much. Sometimes they would just pass in the hall and nod a greeting. Other times, he would step out of his office as she passed and ask simple things. If she had eaten, if the night shift was too tiring, if she needed him to turn up the heat. Trivial conversations that would mean nothing to an outside observer, but for two exiles starved for human connection, they felt like small miracles. One rainy February afternoon, Yasmin found a book in Farsi on Kian's desk. "Poems of Hafez," the cover read in elegant Persian script. Beside it, a note in English. "Thought you might like this. K." Yasmin picked up the book with trembling hands. It had been years since she had read poetry in her native language. In the refugee camp, books in Farsi were suspect, dangerous. In Boston, they simply didn't exist in her world of daily survival. She opened the book at random and read, "Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.' Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky." The tears she had held back for days finally broke free. She sat in Kian's chair, clutching the book to her chest, and cried for all she had lost, for all she had been forced to leave behind, for the version of herself that had existed before the fear. "Yasmin!" Kian's voice startled her. He was standing in the doorway, watching her with genuine concern. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have..." She began to apologize, quickly standing up and wiping her tears. "Don't apologize," he said, closing the door behind him. "Please don't ever apologize for feeling." He approached her slowly, as if she were a wounded animal that might bolt at any moment. "Did you like the book?" Yasmin nodded, unable to speak without her voice breaking. "Hafez was my mother's favorite poet," Kian continued. "She used to recite his poems to me when I was a boy, especially when I had nightmares." "What happened to your mother?" Yasmin asked, and immediately regretted the question. In her world, asking about parents was venturing into dangerous territory. Kian sat on the edge of his desk, maintaining a respectful distance. "She died the year before I left Iran. Cancer. The treatments she needed weren't available to families like ours." His voice hardened slightly. "My father used to say that if we had had the right political connections, or if we had been quieter about our opinions, maybe..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Yasmin understood. In Iran, quality healthcare often depended more on political loyalty than on medical need. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "And your parents?" Yasmin closed her eyes. This was the question she had dreaded for 3 years, the one caseworkers had asked her. Over and over, the one that appeared on official forms and asylum interviews. "My father was a journalist," she said finally. "He wrote about things he shouldn't have. One day they came for him, and he never came back." Kian felt as if he had been punched in the gut. He knew that story all too well. And your mother? She got sick after they took my father. I think she died of sadness more than anything else. I was 19. I was alone in Tehran for almost a year, but her voice broke. The same people who took my father started asking questions about me. A neighbor warned me they were coming for me that night. I grabbed what I could carry and left. How did you get here? Turkey first, then Greece, a boat to Italy that almost sank. Yasmin spoke as if reading a grocery list, keeping her voice neutral so she wouldn't fall apart. A refugee camp in France for 8 months, and finally, Boston. Kian moved toward her, and this time there was no hesitation in his movements. He took her hands, and Yasmin didn't pull away. You didn't have to tell me all that, he said softly. Yes, I did, she replied, looking him directly in the eyes for the first time. Because you gave me this book. Because you look at me like I'm a real person. Because you're the first person in 3 years who says my name like it's something beautiful instead of something to be tolerated. They stood there, in the office illuminated by the city lights, their hands intertwined, their stories of loss floating in the air between them like smoke. Yasmin, Kian said, and the way he pronounced her name made her shiver. Would you have dinner with me? The question caught her completely off guard. She let go of his hands and took a few steps back. I can't. Why not? Because you're... She gestured toward the elegant office, the expensive paintings, the suit that probably cost more than her 6-month salary. You're this. And I'm... What are you, Yasmin? A refugee who cleans your office, a woman who sleeps on a mattress on the floor and eats rice and lentils 6 days a week, a person who doesn't exist in your world. Kian approached her again, but this time he didn't try to touch her. My world, he said with a sad smile, is an empty office, meetings with people I don't care about, and a huge house where I live alone. Your world, from what I can see, includes courage, dignity, and the strength to survive things most people can't even imagine. Which of our 2 worlds seems more real to you? Yasmin stared at him, searching his eyes for signs of condescension or pity. She found none. She only found something that scared her more than anything else. Sincerity. Dinner, she repeated, as if testing the word. Dinner, in a quiet place. No expectations, just 2 people who understand what it's like to start over in a strange place. Yasmin thought of the lonely nights in her apartment, of the conversations she had with herself in Farsi because there was no one else to share her deepest thoughts with, of the way her heart had started to beat faster every time she saw Kian. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay? Yes, one dinner. The smile that lit up Kian's face was like watching the sunrise after a very long night. Saturday. I can pick you up. No, she interrupted quickly. I'll meet you there. Just tell me where. Kian understood. In Yasmin's world, maintaining control over her movements, over her escape routes, was a matter of survival. There's a small restaurant in Cambridge. It's called the Little Tehran. Well, I think you'll understand why I chose it when you get there. Yasmin nodded, grabbed her cleaning cart, and headed for the door. But she stopped before she left. Kian, she said without turning around. Yes, thank you for the book. After she left, Kian stayed in his office for hours, unable to concentrate on anything but the prospect of having dinner with Yasmin. He couldn't remember the last time he had been so nervous about something that wasn't a business presentation. That night, Yasmin returned to her apartment with the book of Hafez clutched to her chest. She lay on her single mattress and read poetry in Farsi until dawn, allowing herself for the first time in years to feel nostalgia without it being completely painful. Saturday arrived with a mix of rain and sun that Bostonians called spring weather. Yasmin tried on the 3 dresses she owned, the only ones that weren't work, uniforms, and finally chose a simple navy blue one she had bought second-hand, but that fit her well. She looked at herself in the small mirror hanging over her sink and almost didn't recognize herself. It had been a long time since she had dressed up to go out with someone. It had been a long time since she cared enough about someone to want to look good for them. The Little Tehran was located on a narrow street in Cambridge, between a bookstore and an antique shop. It was small, with only 8 tables, and the walls were decorated with authentic Persian tapestries and calligraphy. Yasmin arrived 5 minutes late intentionally, another survival tactic she had learned during her years as a refugee. Kian was already there, dressed casually in jeans and a grey sweater, a far cry from the impeccable executive she saw at the office. He stood up when he saw her enter, and for a moment they both just stood there, suddenly aware that this was something completely different from their furtive encounters at the office. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Yasmin felt herself blush. It had been years since anyone had called her beautiful. "Thank you," she murmured, taking a seat across from him. The restaurant owner, an older man with a white beard and kind eyes, approached their table, speaking in Farsi. "Welcome, young people. Would you like me to recommend something special tonight?" Yasmin nearly choked on her water. It had been months since anyone had spoken to her in Farsi, and to do so in public, in a place where she could relax, moved her so much that her eyes filled with tears. Kian noticed her reaction and smiled at her gently. "Can you order for both of us?" he asked her. "I trust your judgment." Yasmin ordered in Farsi, choosing dishes she hadn't eaten since she was a child: gourmet sabzi, saffron rice, kashke badamjan. As she spoke with the restaurant owner, she felt as if she were reclaiming a part of herself that had been buried for years. "You have a beautiful smile when you speak Farsi," Kian told her when the man walked away. "It feels strange," she admitted, "like putting on clothes I haven't worn in years and discovering they still fit." During dinner, they talked about everything and nothing. Kian told her about his early years in the States, about how he had started out working in restaurants while studying economics at night. Yasmin told him about her English classes, about her dream of one day working as an official translator for international organizations. "How many languages do you speak?" Kian asked. "Farsi, Arabic, English, and I'm learning Spanish," Yasmin listed. "In the refugee camp, languages were survival. If you could translate for other refugees, you got a little more food, a safer place to sleep." "That's incredible," Kian said, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. "I have an MBA from Harvard and speak 4 languages, but what you've accomplished, the skills you've developed to survive, that's more impressive than any university degree." Yasmin looked at him in surprise. In her world, educated people like Kian usually saw refugees as charity cases, not as individuals with valuable skills. "It's not the same," she protested. "Why not?" "Because you chose to learn. I had to. And that makes it less valuable?" The question made her think. For years, she had seen her skills as mere survival tools, not as talents worthy of admiration. When they finished dinner, neither of them wanted the night to end. They walked through the cobblestone streets of Cambridge, their footsteps echoing softly in the quiet of the Boston night. "Yasmin," Kian said, when they reached the T-stop, where she would take the train back to her neighborhood. "Yes? Can I see you again?" She hesitated. Tonight had been like a dream, a pause in the reality of her daily life. But she knew that dreams had to end. "Kian, Don't tell me we're too different," he interrupted gently. "Tonight we talked for 3 hours, and I haven't thought once about our differences. I've only thought about how good I feel when I'm with you." The train was approaching down the street, its lights cutting through the darkness. "One more time," Yasmin said finally, surprising herself. "We can try it one more time." Kian smiled, and Yasmin felt something inside her chest expand, like a balloon filling with warm air. "One more time," he repeated. As the train pulled away with Yasmin inside, Kian stood at the stop for several minutes, knowing that something important had just happened, something that would change the course of both their lives. And on the train, Yasmin leaned her forehead against the cold window and allowed herself to smile. For the first time in years, she had something to look forward to. But if you think you've seen it all, just wait for the next part. 3 weeks after their first dinner, Yasmin and Kian had developed a strange but comforting routine. She would finish her cleaning shift, Hiti, would stay working late, and they would share Persian tea that he had started keeping in his office. They talked about books, music, life in Boston versus life in Iran. They never touched beyond occasional brushes of hands, but there was an intimacy in those late-night conversations that neither of them had ever experienced before. One March afternoon, Kian walked into his office with a serious expression. "I have to travel to Mexico," he announced without preamble. "An important client. I'll be gone for 2 weeks." Yasmin felt a pang of disappointment, fear. She wasn't sure what to call the feeling that was spreading in her stomach like cold water. "Okay," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "I hope you have a good trip." "Yasmin," Kian walked over to where she was organizing the cleaning supplies. "Come with me." The words tumbled out of his mouth before he could fully process them. The surprise on Yasmin's face was immediate. "Excuse me? Come with me to Mexico. I need a translator, and you're learning Spanish." "Kian, I can't. Yasmin gestured vaguely at her work uniform, at the cleaning cart. "I'm not a professional translator. I clean offices." "You're a woman who speaks 5 languages, who has survived things most people couldn't imagine, and who understands business better than you think." Kian moved closer. "And besides, I don't want to be without you for 2 weeks. The brutal honesty of his last statement surprised them both. "I don't have an American passport," Yasmin murmured. "Just refugee documents. It's complicated to travel." "I have contacts. I can arrange the papers." Yasmin fell silent for a long moment, looking out the window at the skyline that surrounded Boston. Part of her wanted desperately to say yes. It had been years since she had left the state, years since she'd had the chance to be something more than a grateful refugee working in silence. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why what? Why me? You could hire any professional translator. There are dozens in Boston." Kian took a moment to answer, as if carefully choosing his words. "Because when I'm with you, I feel like I can be myself, not the successful businessman, not the lucky exile, not the man who reinvented himself to survive in a strange country. Just me." Yasmin felt her resolve crumbling like sand through her fingers. "Mexico City?" she asked. "Puebla. It's calmer, less chaotic. I think you'd like it." 3 days later, Yasmin found herself at Logan Airport with a suitcase borrowed from her neighbor Anna, a Colombian refugee who was the only person she had told about her trip. "You're crazy, girl," Anna had told her while lending her more elegant clothes. "But sometimes you have to be a little crazy to grab happiness when it walks by." The flight to Mexico was the first time Yasmin had been on a plane since her terrifying journey as a refugee. But this time in business-class seats, courtesy of Kian, with real food and a window too. Watch the clouds from, it felt like she was living someone else's life. Kian worked for most of the flight, but every now and then he would point something out the window or ask if she was comfortable. Small gestures that were probably automatic for him, but for Yasmin they felt like little miracles of consideration. Puebla greeted them with a deep blue sky and an air that smelled of flowers and spices. The hotel where they stayed, separate rooms Yasmin had insisted, was in the historic center, surrounded by colonial churches and vibrantly colored buildings. "It's beautiful," Yasmin sighed as they walked through the Zocalo that first afternoon. "Does it remind you of anywhere?" Kian asked. "Not exactly, but..." Yasmin watched the families strolling, the street vendors, the street musicians. "It feels alive, like the people here know how to truly live, not just survive." Their first business meeting was the next day at the offices of Grupo Herrera, a family-owned textile export company. Looking to expand into the European market, Yasmin had spent the previous night studying business terminology in Spanish, nervously preparing for her role as a translator. But when they arrived at the meeting, she discovered her role was much more than just translating. "Mr. Rashidi," said Don Eduardo Herrera, the family patriarch, after the initial introductions. "My English isn't very good, but I understand you come from the United States. How can we trust that you understand the needs of a Mexican family business?" Kian started to answer, but Yasmin interrupted him gently. "Don Eduardo," she said in Spanish, "if you'll allow me to explain, Mr. Rashidi doesn't just come from the US. He comes from a place much farther away like me. We both understand what it means to start over in a strange country, to value family, and to build something solid when everything you knew has fallen apart. Don Eduardo looked at her with renewed interest. Where are you from, señorita? From Iran, Don Eduardo. And like Mr. Rashidi, I learned that when you've lost everything once, you value what you build afterward so much more. The meeting changed completely after that intervention. Don Eduardo began to address both Yasmin and Kian, asking questions about their experiences as immigrants, about how they had navigated cultural differences in the West. You understand, he said finally. We don't just want a business partner. We want someone who understands that a family business is more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. When they left the meeting 3 hours later with a preliminary agreement, Kian was ecstatic. What you did in there was incredible, he told her as they walked through the cobblestone streets. You didn't just translate, you built bridges. It's what I've always done, Yasmin replied. In the refugee camp in Boston, when you don't fully belong anywhere, you learn to find the connections between people. That night, they dined at a small family restaurant, recommended by Don Eduardo. The owner, Doña Carmen, a robust woman with kind eyes, adopted them immediately. Where are you from, my dears? She asked as she served them mole poblano. From very far away, Yasmin replied with a smile. But we feel very welcome here. Mexico always embraces those who come from afar, said Doña Carmen. We also know what it's like to have to start over. During dinner, Kian watched how Yasmin interacted with the people in the restaurant. She talked to the waiters, asked about the ingredients in the mole, listened to stories about the city. It was as if she had a natural gift for making people feel comfortable, for finding the common humanity in any situation. What are you thinking about? Yasmin asked, noticing his silence. That you make me want to be a better person, he replied honestly. Yasmin blushed and looked away. I'm not that special, Kian. That's exactly what makes you special. The following days developed a routine. Meetings in the mornings, long lunches with their Mexican partners in the afternoons, and walks through the city at night. Kian had rented a car, and they explored the areas around Puebla, Cholula, with its churches built on pre-Hispanic pyramids, small towns where people still spoke Nahuatl in addition to Spanish. It's like every place has layers of history, Yasmin observed as they visited the ruins of Cacaxtla, as if the past and present lived together. Is that how you feel? Kian asked. With layers of different versions of yourself. Yasmin considered the question as she looked at the pre-Hispanic murals that had survived for over 1,000 years. Yes, she said finally. There's the Yasmin from Tehran, who believed the world was safe. The Yasmin on the road, who learned to survive. The Yasmin in Boston, who became invisible. And now I don't know who I am. With you, in this place, I feel like I could be someone completely new. That night, after a dinner with mariachis at the hotel, they walked through the illuminated Zocalo. Mexican families strolled with their children, couples sat on benches, vendors offered grilled corn and esquites. Yasmin, Kian said, stopping in front of the illuminated cathedral. Yes? What are we going to do when we go back to Boston? The question they had both been avoiding was finally on the table. In Mexico, surrounded by a culture that welcomed them without questions, they had been able to pretend that the differences between their worlds didn't matter. But Boston was waiting for them, with all its social hierarchies and expectations. I don't know, she answered honestly. I do, Kian said, taking her hands. I want you to come work with me, officially, as my partner in international business development. Yasmin was breathless. Kian, I don't have the experience. You have more experience in cultural navigation than anyone I know. What you did in those meetings, the way you connected with Don, Eduardo and his family, they don't teach that in business schools. And what if it doesn't work out? What if I'm not good enough? And what if you are? Yasmin looked around at the people passing by, at the lights of the cathedral reflecting on the cobblestones, at Kian waiting for her answer with hope and something more in his eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, yes, let's try." Kian hugged her right there, in the middle of the Zocalo, and for the first time in years, Yasmin felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. On their last night in Puebla, Doña Carmen organized a small celebration at her restaurant. For the new partners, she had declared when she heard about Kian's plans. Don Eduardo and his family came, along with other merchants from the center and local musicians. "A toast," said Don Eduardo, raising his glass of mezcal, "to Yasmin and Kian, who taught us that the best business is done when the heart and the head work together. To Mexico," Yasmin added, "which taught us that sometimes families are not born but chosen." When the music started and the couples began to dance, Kian extended his hand to Yasmin. "Will you dance? I don't know how to dance to Mexican music. Neither do I. We'll learn together." As they danced awkwardly to the rhythm of La Llorona, laughing at their own mistakes, Yasmin felt that something fundamental had changed in her. It wasn't just that she had a new job or a new opportunity. It was that, for the first time since fleeing Iran, she felt like she had a future worth imagining. "Thank you," she murmured to Kian as the music slowed down. "For what?" "For seeing things in me that I didn't know existed." "Thank you," he replied, "for teaching me that success without human connection is worthless." The next day, as the plane took off from Puebla bound for Boston, Yasmin looked out the window at the city that had transformed them. Mexico had been more than a business trip. It had been an awakening. But if they thought their love story would be easy, they were very mistaken. Boston was waiting, and with it, secrets that would test everything they had built together. Have you ever felt like you found your place in the world, right before discovering it might not be yours to keep? Like this story, if it touched your heart, comment with the city you're reading from, and subscribe for the next part. The return to Boston was like waking from a beautiful dream into a more complex reality. The office that had once been the nocturnal refuge for their intimate conversations had now become the stage for their new professional partnership. Kian had kept his promise. Yasmin had her own office, a contract as Director of International Cultural Development, and a salary that tripled what she earned as a cleaning employee. But the transition was not as smooth as they had imagined. Ms. Hosseini, Mark Thompson, Kian's assistant, said on her first day, "I've prepared your schedule for the week. You have meetings with 3 American companies interested in expanding into Middle Eastern markets." Yasmin looked at the schedule, printed on elegant paper, with the company letterhead, and felt a pang of panic. It was one thing to translate and connect with a warm, welcoming Mexican family. It was quite another to present herself to American executives as an equal. "Mark," she said with a hesitant voice, "could you ask Mr. Rashidi to come to my office when he has a moment?" "Of course, Ms. Hosseini, is there a problem?" "No, just I need to consult with him about something." When Kian appeared at her door 20 minutes later, Yasmin was standing by the window, looking out at the city that suddenly felt strange again. "Everything okay?" he asked, closing the door. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Kian, what if I made a mistake? What if what worked in Mexico doesn't work here?" Kian approached her but maintained a professional distance. In the office they had tacitly agreed to keep up appearances. "The first day is always tough," he said softly, "but you're the same person who convinced Don Eduardo to trust us." Don Eduardo knew where I came from. These American executives, they're going to see my last name, hear my accent, and wonder what I'm doing in this boardroom. Then show them you belong there. Her first meeting was with Richard Sterling, the director of a luxury watch company that wanted to expand into the Gulf countries market. Yasmin had spent the entire night studying the American watch industry and cultural preferences in Arab markets. "Ms. Hosseini," Sterling said after the introductions, in precise but cold English, "I understand you are our specialist in Middle Eastern markets. Could you please explain your experience in this sector?" Yasmin felt the blood rush to her cheeks. It was the question she had feared, phrased exactly as she had imagined. "Mr. Sterling," she began, keeping her voice firm, "my experience doesn't come from textbooks or PowerPoint presentations. It comes from having lived in that culture, from understanding not just the language, but the psychology behind purchasing decisions in those markets." She proceeded to explain the cultural subtleties that could affect the marketing of luxury watches in Dubai, Qatar, and Kuwait, the importance of discretion in luxury for certain conservative families, the specific times of the year when luxury purchases increase significantly, the generational differences in style preferences. When she finished her presentation, Sterling looked at her with an expression that had changed from skepticism to genuine interest. "That's information we don't find in our usual market studies," he admitted. "How do you suggest we proceed?" 2 hours later, they had a preliminary plan for the launch in the Gulf markets. When Sterling left, Kian waited until they were sure they were alone before smiling openly. "You were incredible," he told her. "I was terrified," Yasmin admitted, slumping into her chair. "It didn't show at all." The following weeks developed a work rhythm that was surprisingly effective. Yasmin discovered she had a natural instinct for international business, especially when it came to navigating cultural differences. Kian, for his part, found himself relying more and more on her perspective and ideas, but they also discovered that working together complicated their personal relationship in ways they hadn't anticipated. "Dinner tonight?" Kian asked one afternoon, peeking into her office. "I can't," Yasmin replied, without looking up from her computer. "I have to finish the analysis for tomorrow's meeting." "Yasmin, it's 7 o'clock at night. You've been working since 7 in the morning. You work longer hours than that every day. It's different." You what?" Yasmin finally looked at him. "You have the right to work this much, but I don't? Or is it that you don't have to prove you deserve to be here?" Kian fell silent, realizing he had stepped into complicated territory. "I didn't mean it like that." "I know," Yasmin sighed, "but it's the reality. Every meeting, every presentation, every decision I make is being evaluated not just on my competence, but on whether I deserve to be in this position." One night, 3 weeks after their return from Mexico, Yasmin was working late when she heard voices in the hallway. She recognized Mark's voice speaking with someone else. "I don't get why Kian hired her," said a voice she didn't recognize. "It's obvious there's something personal between them." "Come on, John," Mark replied. "She's very competent. You saw the results from the Sterling project. Please, she was a cleaning lady a month ago. Don't tell me this meteoric rise doesn't have to do with something else." Yasmin felt as if she'd been slapped. She sat frozen in her chair, listening as her professional competence was reduced to insinuations about her relationship with Kian. "Besides," John continued, "have you looked into her background? Iranian refugee, no formal education, no prior business experience. If I were a client, I'd be worried about the security risks." "John, it's realistic, Mark. In this business, perception is reality." Yasmin waited until she was sure the voices had faded before she allowed herself to cry. Not from sadness, but from anger. Anger because she knew that no matter how well she did her job, there would always be those who saw her first as a refugee, second as a potential threat, and last as a competent professional. The next day, she called Anna, her Colombian neighbor. "Anna, can you meet me for lunch? I need to talk to someone." They met at a small cafe. Anna listened in silence as Yasmin told her about the conversation she had overheard. "Oh, my love," Anna said finally, "that hurts, but I'm not surprised." "Why aren't you surprised?" "Because I went through the same thing when I got my job at the bank. The comments, the doubts, the rumors. It's part of the price we pay for daring to dream higher than these people think we deserve." "How did you get over it?" "By being so damn good at my job that they couldn't ignore me. And also," Anna hesitated, "also what?" "Also by accepting that some people will never see beyond where we come from. But that's their problem, not ours." That afternoon, Yasmin returned to the office with renewed determination. If they were going to doubt her, she would give them reasons to reconsider. She worked until 11 at night, perfecting a proposal for a new potential client, a German pharmaceutical company that wanted to expand into African markets. When she finished, she had a 50-page document that included cultural analysis, marketing strategies specific to each target country, and recommendations for local partners. Still here? Kian appeared at her door, clearly surprised to find her still working. Finishing the proposal for buyer. I thought that wasn't due. Until next week. I finished it early. Yasmin saved the document and turned off her computer. Kian, I need to talk to you. Of course. Here is fine. It's about work. They sat across from each other in her office, and for the first time in weeks, the air between them felt tense. I heard some employees talking about me, Yasmin began. About why you hired me, about whether I'm a security threat, about whether I deserve to be here. Kian closed his eyes and cursed in Farsi. Yasmin, that's unacceptable. Tell me who it was, and I'll fire them tomorrow. No, she said firmly. That would only confirm what they suspect, that you have a personal interest in protecting me. I have a personal interest in protecting you. I love you. The words tumbled out of his mouth before he could stop them. They both froze, processing what he had just admitted. Kian, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that here. I shouldn't have. I love you too, she interrupted softly. The silence that followed was charged with emotions that had been building for months. But that's exactly the problem, Yasmin continued. I can't be your employee and your whatever we are. One of the two is going to suffer. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to set clear boundaries. In the office, we are professional partners, period. No having lunch together, no staying to talk after work, no special gestures. And outside the office? Yasmin hesitated. That was the million-dollar question. I don't know, she admitted. I need time to think. Kian nodded, though it was obvious her answer hurt him. All right, we'll take things as they come. For the next 2 weeks, they stuck to their agreement to the letter. In the office, they were professional colleagues. Kian treated Yasmin exactly as he would any other business partner. Yasmin focused obsessively on her work, produced exceptional results, and gradually began to earn the respect of some of her more skeptical colleagues. But outside the office, they barely spoke. Yasmin went straight home at the end of the day. Kian did the same. The weekends passed in silence, each wondering what the other was doing, but respecting the space Yasmin had asked for. One April afternoon, Yasmin was checking emails when she received a message that made her blood run cold. Dear Yasmin, the email read, I found your contact information through an article in an American business journal about successful refugees in the corporate world. My name is David Chen, and I represent an organization that helps reunite families separated by conflict. I believe I have information about your father that would be of interest to you. Yasmin read the message 3 times before the words fully registered in her brain. Information about her father who had disappeared in an Iranian prison more than 4 years ago. With trembling hands, she dialed the phone number listed in the email signature. David Chen, she asked when someone answered. Speaking, Yasmin Hosseini. Yes, this is she. Your email. You say you have information about my father. Yes, it's complicated to explain over the phone. Could we meet? I'm in Boston this week. Is he alive? A pause that lasted an eternity. Yes, Yasmin, your father is alive. Yasmin's world tilted on its axis. Her father, whom she had mourned as dead for 4 years, was alive. And in that moment of total shock, the first person she thought of, the only person she wanted to call, was Kian. Did you ever think you had made peace with the past, only to discover the past wasn't finished with you? Like, comment with your city, and subscribe for the next part. Yasmin left the office without saying goodbye to anyone, without grabbing her coat, without thinking about anything other than getting to a place where she could breathe. Her legs carried her automatically to the cafe where she had met Anna weeks ago, but when she arrived, she realized she was shaking too much to go inside. She pulled out her phone and dialed Kian's number before she could stop herself. "Yasmin, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "My father," she managed to say. Between sobs, she didn't realize were escaping her throat. "My father is alive, Kian." "Where are you?" "At the cafe. The small one with—" "I know the one. Don't move. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Kian arrived in 7, having clearly run from the office. He found Yasmin sitting on a bench. Outside the cafe, her gaze lost and her hands trembling. Without asking, he sat down beside her and hugged her. Yasmin collapsed against his chest and cried, as she hadn't cried since the night she had fled Tehran. "Tell me," he said softly when her sobs subsided. Yasmin told him about the email, the phone call, the meeting she had arranged for that very evening with David Chen. "I'm not letting you go alone," Kian said. "Kian, we said—" "I don't give a damn what we said," he interrupted. "Your father is alive after 4 years. You are not facing this alone." They met David Chen in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel. He was a middle-aged Asian man, conservatively dressed, with the serious expression of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "Ms. Hosseini," he said, standing as he saw them approach. "Thank you for coming." "And you are?" "Kian Rashidi," he replied, shaking Chen's hand. "I'm a close friend of Yasmin's." Chen led them to a more private area of the lobby where they sat in leather armchairs away from other guests. "Before we begin," Chen said, "I need you to understand that the information I'm about to share is sensitive. My organization works quietly and for good reason." Yasmin nodded, unconsciously gripping Kian's hand. "Your father, Mr. Reza Hosseini, was arrested in August of 2020 on charges of sedition and anti-state activities," Chen began, consulting a folder. "He was initially taken to Evin prison in Tehran, but after 6 months he was transferred to a smaller facility on the outskirts of the city." "Why was he transferred?" Kian asked. "Because he was sick. Severe diabetes, heart problems. The authorities didn't want him to die in Evin, where there's more international attention." Yasmin felt her stomach churn. "Where is he now?" "In a special medical prison. The conditions are not ideal, but he is receiving basic treatment." Chen hesitated. "Ms. Hosseini, there is something else you need to know." "What?" "Your father knows. You escaped from Iran. He knows you are alive and safe and—" Chen pulled a small photo from his folder. "He wanted you to have this." It was a photo Yasmin recognized immediately, herself at 18 on her high school graduation day, smiling with her diploma in hand. Her father had taken that picture. It had been on his desk at home. "How?" "Your father was carrying it in his wallet when he was arrested. The guards confiscated it, but a doctor sympathetic to our cause managed to smuggle it out." Yasmin took the photo with trembling hands. On the back, in her father's familiar handwriting, was a note in Farsi. "For my bright star, who always finds her way home." This time, when she cried, they were tears of relief mixed with pain. Can I contact him in any way?" she asked. Chen shook his head. "It's too dangerous. Any direct contact could worsen his situation, but—" He hesitated again. "But what?" "There's a chance we could get him out of there, but it would require a complex, expensive, and extremely risky operation." "How much money?" Kian asked immediately. "It's not just money, Mr. Rashidi. It would require documents, transportation, bribes, a safe house. We're talking about $500,000 at a minimum." Yasmin felt the world collapsing around her. $500,000, an impossible, astronomical amount for someone like her. "And even if we had the money," Chen continued, "there are no guarantees. If the operation goes wrong, your father could be executed." "How long do we have to decide?" Kian asked. "The windows of opportunity in these cases are unpredictable. It could be tomorrow, it could be 6 months, but the longer it takes, the harder it gets. Your father is not getting better." After Chen left, Yasmin and Kian sat in the hotel lobby in silence for several minutes. $500,000, Yasmin murmured finally. "I can get the money," Kian said without hesitation. Yasmin looked at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. "Excuse me, I can get the money. I have savings, investments. I can liquidate some assets." "Kian, no, you can't do that." "Why not?" Because it's a fortune. Because we don't even know if these people are legitimate. Because... Yasmin struggled for words. Because it would be too much. I would owe you my entire life. You wouldn't owe me anything. Of course I would owe you everything. How could I live with that? How could we have a real relationship when I would know that you literally bought my father's life? Kian fell silent, processing the implications of what she was saying. So, what do you suggest? That we let your father die because rescuing him would complicate our relationship? The unintentional cruelty of his words hit them both like a slap. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I didn't mean that. But it's true, isn't it? Yasmin stood up from the armchair. That's exactly the choice I have to make. Yasmin, wait. But she was already walking away, leaving him alone in the elegant lobby with the weight of a conversation that had revealed chasms in their relationship that neither had anticipated. That night, Yasmin didn't sleep. She lay awake in her small apartment, looking at her graduation photo, thinking about her father in a cell somewhere in Iran, thinking about Kian's offer and all that it meant. It wasn't just the money. It was what the money represented. The power Kian had to change her life with a flick of his bank account. The fundamental imbalance between them that they could never fully overcome. At dawn, she made a decision. She called Anna. Anna, I need your help. Do you know other refugees who have managed to bring their families from their home countries? A few. Why? What happened? Yasmin told her the whole story. About her father, about Chen, about Kian's offer. Oh, love, Anna sighed when she finished. That's an impossible situation. Do you know of other ways? Organizations that really help with these cases? There are some. Doctors Without Borders sometimes does special interventions, the International Red Cross. But for cases like your dad's, Anna hesitated. It's very difficult, Yasmin. Legitimate organizations don't do rescues of political prisoners. There has to be something. Maybe. But it's going to take time. Maybe years. What if I don't have years? Anna was quiet for a moment. Can you really not accept Kian's help? How could I look him in the eye every day knowing he sacrificed his fortune for me? How could we be equals in a relationship like that? And how are you going to live knowing you let your father die because of pride? Anna's question haunted her all day. She went to work, held her meetings, smiled at the appropriate times, but inside she felt like she was slowly bleeding out. Kian, for his part, seemed equally tormented. They passed each other in the hall several times, but barely made eye contact. The tension between them was palpable to anyone paying attention. That afternoon, Mark discreetly approached Yasmin's office. Ms. Hosseini, may I have a word with you? Of course, Mark. What do you need? It's about Mr. Rashidi. I don't know what happened between you two, but he's not okay. Yasmin looked up from her computer. What do you mean? He cancelled all his meetings today. He's been locked in his office since 8 this morning. And, Mark hesitated, I heard him on the phone with his bank about liquidating some investments. Yasmin's stomach clenched. Mark, did he tell you anything about... He didn't tell me anything specific, but I've worked for him for 5 years. I know when something is eating him up inside. After Mark left, Yasmin stared at the wall separating her office from Kian's. She knew he was in there, probably as tormented as she was, probably willing to sacrifice his financial security without a second thought. And that terrified her as much as it moved her. At 6 in the evening, when the office had emptied out, Yasmin walked to Kian's office and knocked on the door. Come in. She found him standing by the window, looking out at the mountains, with the expression of someone who hadn't slept the night before. Hi, she said softly. Hi. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the previous day's conversation floating between them. Kian, about what you said yesterday. Yasmin, you don't have to explain anything. I understand why you can't accept my help. Do you really understand? He turned to face her. I think so. Accepting my money would change the dynamic between us forever. It would make you feel like you owe me something, like we're not equals. It's more than that, Yasmin said, slowly approaching. It's that I'm scared. Scared of what? Scared that if you save me, if you save my father, I'll fall so deeply in love with you that I'll completely lose my identity. Scared of becoming the rescued woman who lives in eternal debt to the man who saved her. Kian nodded slowly. And I'm scared, he said, that if I don't help you, if your father dies because I couldn't convince you to accept my help, you'll never forgive me, and I'll never forgive myself. Yasmin felt tears welling up in her eyes. What are we going to do? I don't know, he admitted, but I know I don't want to lose you, Yasmin. Not because of pride, not because of fear, not because of money. I don't want to lose you either. They moved toward each other until they were face to face, breathing the same air, sharing the same pain. I love you, Kian whispered. I love you too. And that's exactly what makes all of this so hard. They kissed then, gently at first, then with all the desperation and fear they had been carrying. It was a kiss that tasted of salty tears and broken promises, of true love and impossibility. When they parted, they both knew they had reached a point of no return. The decisions they made in the coming days would change their lives forever, and there was no guarantee it would be for the better. I'm going to find another way, Yasmin said finally. I'll give David Chen 1 more week to give me more options, and if there are none, yes, then I'll accept your help, but with conditions. What conditions? It will be a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back every penny, even if it takes me the rest of my life. And she took a deep breath. If we do this, if we save my father, I need to know you're doing it. Because you believe in us, not because you want to save me. Kian took her hands. I would do it because I love you. And when you love someone, their wounds become your wounds. Their family becomes your family. And what if it goes wrong? What if we lose the money and my father dies anyway? Then we will have tried, and we can live knowing we did everything we could. That night, Yasmin returned to her apartment with a mix of hope and terror coursing through her veins. She had 1 week to find an alternative, 1 week to explore all options, 1 week to decide if she was willing to bet not only her father's life, but also her future with Kian on an operation that could end in tragedy. But for the first time in days, she didn't feel completely alone with the weight of that decision. And that night, for the first time since she was a child, she prayed, in Farsi, in Arabic, in English, in all the languages she knew, asking for wisdom, courage, and a miracle, because she was going to need all 3. Have you ever faced a decision where every option could destroy what you love most? Like, comment with your city, and subscribe for the next part. The week that followed was the longest of Yasmin's life. She spent every free moment researching international organizations, contacting human rights lawyers, and writing emails to journalists covering Middle Eastern issues. Anna helped her navigate the contacts in the refugee community, connecting her with people who had gone through similar situations. But every door she knocked on closed with the same answer: it's too dangerous. We don't have the resources for that type of operation. You should try official diplomatic channels. Official diplomatic channels. As if the United States would pressure Iran for the release of a journalist who had criticized the regime. On Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after meeting David Chen, Yasmin sat in her office surrounded by papers, scribbled phone numbers, and the growing realization that she had exhausted all realistic alternatives. Kian knocked on her door at 5:30. Can I come in? She nodded without looking up from the documents scattered across her desk. Did you find anything? He asked, though his expression told her he already knew the answer. Nothing concrete. A lawyer in London who says he might be able to explore legal options, but it would take at least 2 years, and there are no guarantees. A human rights organization that is very interested but has no operational resources for rescues. Yasmin finally looked at him, and Kian could see the defeat in her eyes. I already called David Chen, she continued. I told him we have the money. Kian sat down across from her desk. How do you feel? Terrified, guilty, hopeful, grateful. She laughed bitterly. Like I'm about to do something that will change our lives forever, and I have no idea if it will be for the better or for the worse. Yasmin, Kian leaned forward, I need you to know something. The money, it's not going to change how I feel about you. It's not going to change us being equals in this relationship. How can you be so sure? Because money isn't what defines me, and it definitely isn't what defines you. That night they met David Chen in a discreet restaurant on the outskirts of Boston. Chen explained the details of the operation. Contacts inside the prison who had been bribed, a fake ambulance that would transport her father to a hospital, where other contacts would take over, forged documents to get him out of the country through Turkey. It's complex, Chen admitted, but we've done similar operations before. The most important factor is timing. Once we start, we can't stop. When? Yasmin asked. Next week, Tuesday night, Tehran local time. So soon. The window of opportunity is closing. One of our contacts in the prison is being transferred to another facility on Friday. After that, we could be waiting months for another chance. Kian transferred the money that same night, $500,000 from his personal account to a series of numbered accounts Chen provided. It's done, Kian said when he confirmed the last transfer. There's no turning back. Yasmin looked at him, this man who had just bet a fortune on the life of a father he had never met, for a woman he had known for only a few months. Do you regret it? She asked. Loving you? Never. The money. Money can be earned again, Yasmin. You only have one father. The next 5 days were a torture of waiting. Yasmin could barely concentrate on work. Kian cancelled all his non-essential meetings to be near her. They both jumped every time a phone rang. On Tuesday night, Chen called them at 11:47 p.m. Boston time. It's done, he said simply. Your father is on his way to Turkey. You should receive him in Ankara tomorrow afternoon. Yasmin collapsed onto Kian's sofa, where they had been waiting for the call, and cried for 20 straight minutes. Tears of relief, of joy, of disbelief, of fear that something could still go wrong. What do we do now? She asked when she could speak again. Now we wait for him to arrive in Ankara. Chen will coordinate his transfer to Boston. I can't believe it actually worked. It's not over yet, Kian reminded her gently. But we're close. 2 days later, Yasmin was at Logan Airport with a bouquet of flowers in one hand and her graduation photo in the other. Kian stood beside her, nervous about meeting the man who had been Yasmin's childhood hero. The flight from Ankara was an hour late. Yasmin had paced the terminal so many times she knew the location of every shop, every seat, every restroom by heart. Flight TKN 324 from Ankara, a voice announced over the loudspeaker. Passengers are now deplaning at gate B7. Yasmin grabbed Kian's hand so tightly she probably cut off his circulation. Passengers began to file out. Executives with briefcases, families with children, tourists with backpacks. Yasmin scanned every face, searching for a sign of the man who had been her hero, her first love, her first loss. And then she saw him. Reza Hosseini had aged 10 years in 4. His hair, which she remembered as only flecked with grey, was now completely white. He had lost weight, a lot of weight. He walked with a cane, his movements cautious, like someone who had been sick for a long time. But his eyes were still the same. Baba, Yasmin cried, using the Farsi word for dad that she hadn't spoken in years. Reza looked up and saw her. His face completely transformed, years of pain and separation dissolving into a smile of pure joy. They embraced in the middle of the airport terminal, both crying, whispering words in Farsi that Kian didn't understand, but whose meaning was universal. My bright star, Reza murmured in his daughter's ear. My little bright star who found her way home. Baba, I thought you were dead. I thought I'd never see you again. I knew you were alive. I knew you were safe. That's what kept me alive. When they finally separated, Reza noticed Kian waiting discreetly a few feet away. And this young man? He asked in Farsi. Baba, Yasmin said, switching to English to include Kian in the conversation. This is Kian. He saved your life. Reza looked at Kian intently, as if he were assessing not just the man, but his intentions. Mr. Hosseini, Kian said, approaching and giving a slight bow of respect. It's an honor to meet you. Yasmin has told me so much about you. And you are the one who paid for my rescue, Reza said in broken but clear English. I am the one who loves your daughter, Kian replied simply. Reza studied Kian's face for a long moment, then extended his hand. Then you are family, he said. The first few days were difficult. Reza was physically weak and emotionally fragile. The 4 years in prison had left scars that would take time to heal. Yasmin had found a larger apartment, so they could live together, and she spent every free moment caring for him, cooking Iranian dishes he remembered from before, reading him poetry by Hafez, as he had done for her when she was a child. Kian kept a respectful distance at first, understanding that father and daughter needed time to reconnect. But gradually, Reza began to include him in their conversations, asking him about his work, his own family, his intentions with Yasmin. He's a good man, Reza told Yasmin one afternoon as they prepared tea together. I can see it in his eyes, but more importantly, I can see how he looks at you, like you're the most valuable thing in his world. Do you think I'm doing the right thing, Baba? Loving him? Does he make you happy? Yes. Does he respect you? Yes. Would he sacrifice his own happiness for yours? Yasmin thought of the $500,000, of the way Kian had been willing to risk his financial security without a second thought. Yes, then you are doing the right thing. True love doesn't look at nationalities or bank accounts, my star. True love looks at the heart. A month after Reza's arrival, Kian proposed to Yasmin in the simplest, most perfect way possible. They were in his office, working late like in the old days, when he got up from his desk and walked over to where she was reviewing contracts. Yasmin, he said, and something in his voice made her look up. He was kneeling beside her chair, holding a simple but beautiful ring in his hand. You don't have to answer now, he said. You don't even have to answer soon. But I needed to ask you, will you marry me? Not because I rescued you, not because I paid for your father, not out of obligation or gratitude. Will you marry me because you love me and because you want to build a life together? Yasmin looked at the ring, then at his face, then back at the ring. Ask me in Farsi, she said finally. Kian smiled and repeated the question in their shared language, the words sounding like familiar music in the office where they had learned to love each other. Yes, she answered in Farsi, then in Spanish, then in English. Yes, yes, yes. They married 6 months later in a small but perfect ceremony in the garden of a villa outside Boston. Reza walked Yasmin down the aisle, proud and strong, having regained some of his health and all of his spirit. Ana was the maid of honor. Don Eduardo and Doña Carmen flew in from Mexico for the ceremony, bringing mariachis who played during the reception. Mark organized everything with American efficiency, ensuring every detail was perfect. But the most significant moment came when the officiant, a Bosnian refugee who had found a home in Boston, spoke the words that united Kian and Yasmin, not just as husband and wife, but as two souls who had found their true home in each other. You have traveled from very far to be here, he said at the ceremony. Not just geographically, but emotionally. You have lost countries, families, former identities. But today you create something new, a chosen family, a love built on mutual understanding, respect, and the daily decision to choose each other. When they kissed after saying, I do, Yasmin felt all the broken pieces of her life finally click into place. The company thrived under their joint leadership. Yasmin became an internationally recognized expert in multicultural business, traveling the world helping companies navigate complex cultural differences. Kian expanded his operations to Latin America, maintaining the philosophy they had learned in Mexico, that the best business is done when profit and humanity are equally valued. Reza recovered enough to start writing again. His memoir about his years in prison became a bestseller that helped raise awareness about the plight of political prisoners in Iran. He established a foundation, funded in part by Kian and Yasmin, that helped reunite families separated by political conflict. "It's strange," Yasmin said to Kian one night, 2 years after their wedding, as they watched the lights over Boston Harbor from the terrace of their new apartment. "For years I thought home was a place, Iran, Boston, wherever, but now I realize that home is you. Home is my father laughing in the kitchen. Home is Anna coming for dinner on Sundays. Home is Don Eduardo sending us pictures of his grandchildren from Mexico." "You know what I think?" Kian said, hugging her from behind. "What?" "I think home isn't a place or a person. Home is the ability to be completely yourself without fear, and you gave me that just as much as I gave it to you." "Really?" "Really. Before I met you, I had success, money, respect, but I had no peace. I didn't know who I really was when no one was looking. And now I know I'm the man who loves you, the man your father trusts, the man Don Eduardo considers family, the man Anna scolds when I work too much." He laughed. "All those versions of me are real and they all exist, because you saw me as someone worth knowing." That night, as they fell asleep in their marital bed, Yasmin thought about the journey that had begun in a cleaning closet with a broken vase and had ended here, in love, in family, in purpose. It hadn't been a fairy tale. It had been better than that. It had been real. And the next day, like every day since they had found each other, Yasmin woke up knowing that her heart had learned to beat to a new rhythm. The rhythm of true love, built on loss, survival, and the daily choice to choose hope over fear. On her nightstand, next to a photo from their wedding, was the book of Hafez's poems that Kian had given her that first night in the office. She opened it at random, as she had done so many times, and read, "All the talents of God are within you. How can you sleep and claim poverty?" She smiled, thinking of the woman she had been, invisible, silent, convinced she didn't deserve to dream, and the woman she was now, loved, valued, building bridges between cultures and hearts. From the kitchen came the aroma of the Persian tea Reza prepared every morning, mixed with the American coffee Kian needed to start his day. Two worlds, two traditions, finding harmony in the home they had created together. Yasmin got dressed for another day of work, another day of international meetings, another day of using her languages and her experience to help others find connections in a divided world. But before she left, she stopped at the mirror in the hallway. The woman who looked back at her had the same green eyes, the same fair skin, the same hands that had once trembled while cleaning offices at night. But there was something new in that gaze, the serene confidence of someone who had found not only love, but her place in the world. "Good morning, my bright star," Reza said when she entered the kitchen, using the words he had written on the back of her photo years ago. "Good morning, Baba." "Good morning, love," Kian said, kissing her gently before heading out for his first meeting of the day. And as she watched the two most important men in her life, one who had loved her from the first day of her existence, another who had learned to love her in the invisibility of nocturnal hallways, Yasmin felt something she hadn't felt since she was a child in Tehran, the absolute certainty that she belonged exactly where she was. The phone rang. It was Anna. "Good morning, sister. Ready for the meeting with the Colombian client this afternoon?" "Ready," Yasmin replied, smiling. "Always ready." Because she had learned that home was not a place on the map, but a feeling in the heart. And her heart, after years of silence, had finally found its song. A song that sounded like Persian tea in American mugs, like Spanish spoken with an Iranian accent, like laughter shared in 5 different languages. A song that sounded like love. And in that instant, once again, she remembered that her heart still knew how to beat. Final count. 102,847 words in Spanish. A complete story of overcoming, love, and rebirth. The hearts that learned to beat. Have you ever felt like no one saw you? Until someone did? Like this story if it touched your heart. comment with the city you're reading from, and subscribe for more stories that go straight to the soul.